Okay, the next topic is Jack Ruby / the mob, and that will begin with the opening statement by Landon.
Let's do the last two together. Just double them.
Okay.
We're going a little long. Okay, great. So, Jack Ruby, 2 days after he shot Lee Harvey Oswald in the stomach, and here's a bunch of reasons why it doesn't make sense to me. Number one, the basement of the Dallas Police Department was described by a reporter, a third-party reporter, as an armed guard station. That's what he said about being down there. It wasn't like, oh, let's just walk in here and let's walk out. This is a place that it was impossible to get in or out of. And Jack Ruby, a person who owned a strip club in New Orleans, just found his way into there. That doesn't make sense to me. Bobby Kennedy's son, Robert Kennedy, said that his dad said this. His father had investigators do research into the assassination and found that phone records of Oswald, and nightclub owner Jack Ruby, who killed Oswald 2 days later, were like an inventory of mafia leaders the government had been investigating. Now, this is why this is a very significant statement. You're not going to get hardly any statements from Kennedys about anything regarding to this, ever. This is one of a very few. So in your mind, this should sit near the top of the pile. When he looked at the phone records of Oswald, and he looked at the phone records of Jack Ruby, to him, it looked like an inventory of mafia leaders the government had been investigating. These are quotes from Jack Ruby during an interview. Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives, the people that had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in the position I'm in, will never know the true facts come above board to the world. Now, what Dallas is going to try to paint him of a picture as, he's going to try to say, Jack Ruby was crazy, Jack Ruby really wanted to be somebody, Jack Ruby, why would the mafia hire him? He was a terrible person, and I'm going to answer some of those questions right now. The reason I think that the mafia probably, or the ex-CIA people probably hired Jack Ruby is because they were scrambling. I think they probably had a plan where they were going to get Oswald in the movie theater, or they were going to get Oswald at a different time, and that plan fell through, and they were scrambling, and they were like, what are we going to do? Who can we get to do something? And they got Jack Ruby to go and shoot him. Here's a quote from Jack Ruby. Gentlemen, I want to tell the truth, but I can't tell it here. If you want a fair shake out of me, you have to take me to Washington. He was scared for his life. He said, I'm not talking unless you take me to Washington. Now, it's a kind of a big deal when a person, I'm not bringing up the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald said he was a patsy, because that's not really a plausible argument. But when someone says something like, I want to tell you, but I can't because I don't feel safe, that seems like a more reasonable quote. Here's another quote from Jack Ruby. But if I'm eliminated, there won't be any way of knowing. I've been used for a purpose. That to me sounds like somebody who was involved in a mafia cover-up. Now here's some evidence for the government's cover-up. Now, at the top of it, Dallas doesn't believe in the Warren Commission, really. He doesn't think it's as bad as I think it is, but no one really believes in the Warren Commission, so I'm not going to spend any time really talking about how terrible it is. Dallas thinks there's some things in it that are good, and a lot of things in it that are right, but I think that it's pretty terrible, so I'm not even going to spend any time on it. The first thing that I want to talk about is the Katzenbach memo for the government cover-up, which the Katzenbach memo was a memo from Nicholas Katzenbach, who was the Deputy Attorney General, on November 25th, 1963, about a bunch of things about the Kennedy assassination. Here's what he said. The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin. He did not have Confederates who were still at large, and that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial. Now, does it make sense to you that a person that was that high up, the Attorney General, would that strongly, 3 days after the assassination, say very clearly, the public must think this? Because that doesn't make sense to me. If something happened to our president, I think the Attorney General would say, let's find the killer no matter who they are, let's go as long as it takes, let's find out who the person is. But that's not his attitude. His attitude is, we know who this person is. Let me show you this. This is a newspaper from November 22nd, 1963. In the newspaper, here's what the article said. A sniper shot President Kennedy and Governor John Connally in Texas in downtown Dallas today. The Secret Service said the president remained in the emergency room and the government was moved to the general operating room of Parkland Hospital. Now listen to this. U.S. Representative Albert Thomas of Texas said both were still alive in a hospital emergency room. Now it seems absolutely ridiculous to me that the newspaper is reporting the word sniper, singularly. A sniper shot down President Kennedy while not knowing that the president was already dead. So they don't know that fact, but they're very sure that a singular sniper shot down President Kennedy. That seems a little fishy to me. Here's a video. It's too long, but basically what the video is you can watch it afterwards if you want. It's a photograph expert looking at the picture of Lee Harvey Oswald when he's standing on the cover of Life magazine holding the gun. And the photograph expert says Lee Harvey Oswald has a different shaped chin. He points out a spot in the picture right by his head where the colors and the lines move like this because it was just a doctored image. And he says categorically it's a doctored image.
Is that Grodin, by the way?
No. No, it wasn't Grodin. It was a photograph expert. Now here's the thing that I just don't know how I don't know how Dallas is going to respond to this. So this is a Parkland Hospital press conference 1 hour after John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. This is a big problem for Dallas. The press conference was given at Parkland Hospital at 2:16 on November 26, 1963, just over 1 hour after President Kennedy had been pronounced dead. The conference was held by two doctors, Dr. Malcolm Perry and Dr. Kemp Clark. Now, while Dallas is relying on the testimony of doctors who were born after the assassination took place, I'd like to rely on the testimony of the doctors who looked at John F. Kennedy's head after he was shot and when he was dead. And Dr. Malcolm Perry was being aggressively questioned. He made these three remarks about the throat wound. Number one, there was an entrance wound on the neck. That's very clear. Now that's a doctor with no stake one way or the other. He doesn't win any points if it's a conspiracy. He doesn't lose any. He has no idea the conspiracies are even going to happen. He's just accurately assessing his opinion and what he sees. Number two, his statement was, it appeared to be coming at him when asked about where the bullet came from. Now you saw that John F. Kennedy never once turned around his head during the entire Zapruder film. So if the doctor says the bullet came from the front, it came at him. And third, when questioned about it again, he said the wound appeared to be an entrance wound in the front of the throat. Now that's a doctor opinion, not a doctor who looked at photographs, not a doctor who looked at the Warren Commission, but a doctor who looked at the president's cold, dead body on the stretcher at Parkland Hospital. There's another thing called the Sibbert and O'Neill report. These were two FBI agents, and what they said was that the bullet wound was below the shoulders, 2 inches to the right of the middle line of the spinal column. You notice that when I talked about the holes in the jacket and how it went through the shoulder and out the neck, Dallas never addressed that, because I don't know if he has an answer for how it went through the back but out the throat. What he might say, and I mentioned this before, is that the jacket was scrunched up, and that's the reason why the holes were higher, but the wound potentially was at the other spot. But what these two FBI agents said, the wound was below the shoulders, 2 inches to the right of the middle line of the spinal column, a location consistent with the bullet holes in the president's shirt. Now, these are two FBI agents who looked at the president's body, and they said, the holes in the shirt, that's where the hole was in his body. And they're not people who looked at photographs, they're people who looked at his body on November 22nd. Now, interestingly enough, neither James Sibbert nor Francis O'Neill was interviewed for the Warren Commission. So while the Warren Commission interviewed thousands of people over a 9-month span, they did not interview two FBI agents who looked at the president's body and wrote a report about it. That seems fishy to me. That's it.
Okay. I'll respond to all that in my rebuttal, but the opening statement here for this. I'm just going to give you some facts of the Jack Ruby killing. I'm not even going to do my usual long-winded paragraphs. 4 minutes before Jack Ruby shot Lee Harvey Oswald, he was at the Western Union office a block and a half away, wiring $25 to one of his strippers. This is date stamped, 1/17. So, 1/17, he sends a Western Union telegram. Telegram, what do you call it? Western Union telegram? Yeah. He wires $25. At 1:21 is when the president was shot. I'm sorry, when Lee Harvey Oswald was shot. He had about a minute and a half to a minute 45 to get to the city hall where Oswald was being transferred. Oswald was being transferred he got transferred at 1:20. I'm sorry, it was 12:21, not 1:21. Now, Oswald was originally scheduled to be transferred at 10 o'clock. Why was Jack Ruby not waiting at City Hall, especially if he had such easy access to it at 10 o'clock? The interrogation that Oswald was going through that morning was extended because they'd invited someone else into the interrogation, so it went an hour long. Lee Harvey Oswald at that time was at home. Jack Ruby was at home. Jack Ruby shows up to Western Union with his beloved dog. His dog was someone that he was was the love of his life. He referred to it as the love of his life. Left the dog in the car, walked from the Western Union office back to his car, started to drive, saw that the entrance of the city hall was opening, the garage was opening because the police car was getting out. He sees a bunch of people down there. Jack Ruby was known for always wanting to be in the middle of the action. Gets out of his car, walks, sneaks past, the garage door came in, he walks down, gets to the bottom of the garage entrance. Literally 50 seconds later, Oswald walks right by and he shoots Oswald in the stomach. If there had been someone in front of him in line at the Western Union office, he would not have shot Lee Harvey Oswald. If Lee Harvey Oswald had not had his interrogation delayed, he would not have been shot. If if a cop had not managed to be driving out of the garage at that time, Jack Ruby would not have shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Jack Ruby didn't need to use his connections to get in there. He walked in because the garage was open, and the timing of it had to be so precise. And the actions of a man who leaves his dog in the car, his beloved dog hasn't made any arrangements for anything, suddenly is apparently part of a conspiracy to cover this up. Now, Landon mentioned the fact that these guys were desperate and this brings up a very important point. This is whoever pulled this off, whoever decided to kill the President of the United States and actually get away with it and pull it off, somehow couldn't figure out a way to silence Lee Harvey Oswald in the hour before he got to the Texas theater. Somehow they didn't, like if it was the mob, wouldn't they have said, hey, when you're done shooting him, we're going to pick you up, give you a ride somewhere, take you to it, and then they would have taken him to a field and shot him. And all that time they managed to not get a hold of Lee Harvey Oswald. He got caught by the police. This amazing conspiracy theory, these guys were able to pull off this astonishing feat that has never been found out. They're so logical and good at what they do, and so good at keeping silent. And that second shooter on the grassy knoll was so professional, yet they somehow let Oswald slip through their grasp. Now he's in the cop. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald also showed up at a news conference on Friday night Jack Ruby showed up at a news conference for Lee Harvey Oswald. Didn't shoot him then. Why not? Didn't have his gun on him. So this is it defies logic that Jack Ruby was assigned by somebody to shoot Lee Harvey Oswald, didn't get any money for it. There was no evidence whatsoever of any connections to the mob. This notion that his phone calls reflected a bunch of phone calls to mobsters is actually quite exaggerated. He was making phone calls in the weeks leading up to the assassination because of the fact that he was having union problems. And so he was calling some of his, whatever ties he had to any organized crime to help him with union problems. They didn't manage to help him. So this high and mighty hitman who was hired by the mob to kill Kennedy couldn't get any help from the mob leading up to it. It doesn't make sense, really, that the mob or the CIA utilized a low-life strip club owner to pull off the cover-up of the most massive operation of the century. It's the whole reason why we believe in a cover-up, and yet Jack Ruby is irrefutably also a loser. He had been a loser at every turn in his life. His strip club was
He owned his own business.
yeah, and was losing lots and lots of money. It was a strip club. What did he get out of it? Now Landon also, I'll get to this later, sorry. Jack Ruby was known as a blowhard. Jack Ruby was known as a stalker. He was known as mentally unstable. He was not liked by most people. None of his associates, none of the people who worked for him, listen, this is very important. Without exception, without exception, every single person who knew Jack Ruby or was his relative or roommate or family member did anything but laugh at the notion that he was connected to the mob. People who believe he was connected to the mob were not people who knew him, and they were not law enforcement. Law enforcement covered the mob. They had tons of surveillance back in the 60s. They were listening to all the mob conversations. None of them connected Jack Ruby whatsoever to the mob. That's Jack Ruby. I don't believe that the Warren Commission was bad. I believe the Warren Commission was actually made up of some of the most respected people at the time, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, several esteemed congressmen, including Gerald Ford, multiple independent. The one mistake that the Warren Commission made was they didn't account for the first shot. They just said, we know about the 2 shots, we don't know where the first shot came from or what happened to it. But it's for such a flawed organization, it's been 50 years, and they have not been, nothing has come out that has said that their conclusion was wrong. A lot of people have said it. They asked a lot of questions, independent writers and whatnot, but a committee was formed in the late 70s to analyze it. They confirmed what the Warren Commission said up until they heard about a 4th shot on an audio recording that turned out to be false. It has been scrutinized and analyzed. The Warren Commission has been analyzed. Are we to expect that these men who had devoted their lives to the country and who were esteemed and greatly had amazing reputations would put all of that on the line for a sloppy report that they knew everyone was going to read? It is amazing that after 50 years, they're looked at as flawed when their theory has not been disproven, and nothing has come out saying anything different than the lone gunman. So that's my perfect. That's my statement on the notion that Jack Ruby was a hitman executing a cover-up.
Landon, your rebuttal?
Dallas said that the people on the Warren Commission were the best people at the time, and I think that in some vague sense that is true. It was Chief Justice Supreme Chief Justice of the Supreme Court or whatever, Earl Warren, and it doesn't make sense that he would be the person put in charge of a committee to solve a crime and figure out what happened. Yes, he was good at a judge, but I don't think Harvest is going to hire me to make the film that we're about to make next year. I think they're going to hire you for that, Dallas, because that's what you do. And one of the criticisms people said of Barack Obama when he was elected is, well, he's never run anything. And I think that, in my opinion, we've seen that since Barack Obama's never run an organization, he's failed in some ways as president because he didn't know how to do it. Earl Warren had no idea what he was doing. He didn't interview Siebert and O'Neill. He didn't interview a lot of significant people. You're minimizing those things. Those things are a big deal. The Warren Commission was a big disappointment. And you said no conclusion has ever come that said he was wrong. Well, it's my conclusion, so that's one. And also the House Select Committee on Assassinations. I know you say that it's only because of the audio recording, but they did submit publicly their findings that said that there was a 4th shooter. Additionally, one more thing. Let me remember what I wrote here in my notes. One sec. Also, you said that the reason that people started believing in conspiracies was because of Jack Ruby. I think that some people at the time started because of that, but I don't think that's why people now believe in conspiracy. The reason is not because of Jack Ruby. I think that's a very small footnote on the conspiracy. The big thing is that his head goes back, that his head explodes, and the witnesses. Those are the reasons. It's not, Jack Ruby isn't a linchpin in my mind. He's not a significant aspect.
Landon made some really interesting points that reflect what James had brought up earlier. And this is really important. He said the exit wound here looked like an entry wound. The doctor at Parkland said that. It's true. He said he had an entry wound in his throat, that what he thought was an entry wound. Now, first of all, let's make it very clear that the doctors at Parkland were not pathologists. And nor were they at all qualified. Their job was not to analyze what had happened. Their job was to save the president's life. So they were not qualified to decide what was entry, what was exit. But here's the very fascinating thing. If it was an entry wound, where was the exit wound? And if indeed exit wounds are messy, as Pastor James said, why wasn't the wound in his back messy? The wound in his back was an entrance wound. The reason that the exit wound out of his front was not messy is because, I'll say, the reason that the exit wound in his throat was not messy was because it was a full metal jacket, specifically designed in 1912 by the Geneva Convention to pierce through people's bodies and not kill them necessarily. They wanted to reduce fatalities. So it was designed to pierce through and keep going, not to explode, not to be as messy. Now, you may say to me then, well then that shows why the wound in his back wasn't messy either. Well then that would claim that Landon's saying this was higher than his back. So if we're saying that this is an entry wound and it went out his back, which is lower, that the shot came from above. So it didn't come from the grassy knoll, it came, we've added a third shooter now from the overpass that shot Kennedy right in the throat. It went over Connolly's head somehow, hit him in the throat as an entrance wound, and exited out his back as also an entrance wound. And where did it go? He's sitting in a seat. There's no bullet behind him. There's no hole in the seat behind him. So if this was an entrance wound, where did the bullet go? The bullet went into the front seat. That's why this is an entrance wound, this is an exit wound. It doesn't start getting messy because it's a full metal jacket until it starts to tumble and hit Connolly's body. And even then, it was still, because it's a full metal jacket, relatively clean. He said why the Warren Commission, or you've mentioned this, the district attorney saying, listen, we have to, the public needs to know that this guy did it. They need to believe that this guy did it. The reason for that was very simple. They didn't want a massive war on their hands. So the reason that they weren't believing that they needed to examine some massive conspiracy yet is because they had the killer. They had a guy who was seen by multiple witnesses. They had a guy who shot a police officer. They had a guy who was, when he was arrested, resisted arrest. They had the fingerprints, they had the bullets, they had the 3 shots, everything matched up. So they were like, we got to make sure that this doesn't become a conspiracy theory because obviously if it's blamed on the Soviets, we have a Cold War on our hands. Jack Ruby's testimony, he mentioned how he was scared. He didn't mention that Jack Ruby said specifically, the mob had nothing to do with it, I'm not part of any conspiracy. When he was talking, if you read his testimony, he was delusional. He had mental problems. He was on high medication. He attempted suicide in his jail cell by running and ramming his head into the wall. This was a very unstable, mentally ill man, and the testimony is actually sad to read. And he was saying, I got to get to the president. You got to get me to meeting with Lyndon Johnson. So
30 seconds.
The photo expert about Lee Harvey Oswald, this has been debunked many, many times, that the photo was doctored. Every pathologist who's looked at it since, every committee that's been formed has confirmed it. I'm going to read you real quick the House Select Committee of Assassinations. You said 30 seconds.
30 seconds. You can do it in your next, but Landon, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes for final time.
Great. Okay, this is the last thing that I'm going to say, and then I'm going to be done. I feel like I've presented to you what the witnesses that were there said, and I feel like Dallas has presented to you what people now and since then think. And so if I was you, I think that I've done a better job convincing you that there was some sort of conspiracy than that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Basically, for Dallas to be right, every single thing he said has to be 100% right in my view. And for me to be right, only about 25% of the things I've said have to be right. So if I've said 25% of the things that I've said, if they sound good to you, I think that you should vote for conspiracy. And the last thing I would say is, number 1, his head went backwards in the film as he was shot from the front. Number 2, 39 witnesses said that they heard shots from the grassy knoll. Number 3, the bullets behave differently. So if one bullet goes through and then the next bullet explodes, in my mind, they can't be from the same gun. So that's how I rest my case.
All right. Real quick, the bullet that did hit Kennedy's skull and exploded was matched to the same gun. It was found conclusively that it was the same bullet as the other bullets and was conclusively matched to the gun by every committee that's looked at it. So it was just not a bullet it was not a different bullet. I'm going to read to you the House Select Committee in 1978. That's what we're referring to. So the Warren Commission was who was put on this at the beginning. 1978, so many people were questioning it that they assigned this new committee. It was also made up of experts and legal experts and whatnot. and Landon has used them several times as evidence of a conspiracy. Here was their final conclusion. The committee believes on the basis of the evidence available to it that the Soviet government was not involved in the assassination of Kennedy. The committee believes on the basis of the evidence available to it that the Cuban government was not involved in the assassination of Kennedy. The community believes on the basis of the evidence available to it that anti-Castro Cuban groups, as groups, were not involved in the assassination of Kennedy, but that the available evidence does not preclude the possibility that individual members may have been involved. The community believes on the basis of the evidence available to it that the National Syndicate of Organized Crime as a group was not involved in the assassination of Kennedy, but that the available evidence does not preclude the possibility that individual members may have been involved. The Secret Service, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Central Intelligence Agency were not involved in the assassination of Kennedy. Again, it was based on the fact that they heard a fourth shot on a dictaphone recorder that was later proven to not have been in Dealey Plaza at the time. That was the basis of their argument. Once they heard that fourth shot, they went, oh, it's got to be a conspiracy. Then they went back and said, okay, well, again, no conclusive evidence of any conspiracy, but we've got to find something because there was a fourth shot. Landon has brought up again the back and to the left.
And
okay, so that's my rebuttal.
yeah, so now you get your 3 minutes for your closing
okay.
statement.
I'm gonna, because this back and to the left thing is still an issue. Even though you will not find pathologists now other than one guy named Cyril Wecht, who was part of the House Select Committee in 1978, who doesn't believe that this is an entrance wound, that no one believes that came from the grassy knoll anymore, other than outsiders who are raising questions like Landon said. So I was going to, skip over this because it's, I didn't think I'd need it, but apparently I do because the back and to the left thing is still there. Multiple analysis has been made of this whole back and to the left thing, and to decide whether or not it's, good grief, I've gone through this already. It's here. What happens when a bullet hits someone? Okay, a scholarly article in the International Journal of Legal Medicine titled "On the Physics of Momentum in Ballistics: Can the Human Body be Displaced or Knocked Down by a Small Arms Projectile?" It says shooting incidents are often portrayed as resulting in a sometimes violent backwards displacement of the victim. This opinion is also not infrequently held by expert witnesses. The physical force responsible for this would be momentum, mass times velocity. The physics of momentum in ballistic injury is explained in detail. The maximum momentum goes into some science numbers about, again, how much a bullet weighs, how light it is. For you to cause something to be forced backwards, it has to match in weight. Counterbalance is constantly maintained by neurophysiological reflexes. So the effect of the momentum transferred from the missile is virtually zero, and there is no backwards motion of the person shot. Empirical evidence verifying these calculations can be obtained by hunting big game from human gunshot victims and from a video documentary demonstrating the lack of any backwards motion of a person wearing body armor after hits from a central fire rifle. It doesn't happen. They don't fall back. We have hunters in the room. When you shoot a deer, even in the head, it doesn't go like this. It slumps. Sometimes it even falls forward. There is nothing that says, as a rule or even as a common thing, that when a bullet hits you, you go in the direction of where the bullet's going. That is not ballistics theory. It's not how it works. And so the back and to the left theory not only fails on that element, it also fails on the grassy knoll element, saying that for him to be shot from here, the exit wound would be here and the bullet would have gone into Dealey Plaza and not been found in the car. The bullet fragments that hit his head were found in the car. How is that possible if it came from here? And how is it possible that there's no massive exit wound? How is it possible that on the video you saw the jet propulsion was this way and not back that way? And if that jet propulsion happens, it would have caused his head to actually shoot forward.
30 seconds.
Again, 50 years. Landon is correct. You can raise a lot of questions in any case. O.J. Simpson was found innocent even though there was a trail of blood from the crime scene to his car. It was his blood. They still say, well, but there was a police officer who was racist, and there was other guy who we thought had a motive to kill, but it's at the end of the day, people saw Lee Harvey Oswald do it. They saw him shoot a cop. Nobody saw another gunman, and there is no evidence that another gunman existed. He vanished without a trace. Any bullet that he fired vanished without a trace, and the magic bullet theory that says that the bullet had to have been magical was truly magical in the sense that it would have disappeared. The only place that that bullet could have gone, if it hit Kennedy in the back, was out his throat, into Connolly. Otherwise, the bullet would have been sitting in the front seat, or sitting, it would have pierced the seat in front of Kennedy. So, for Landing's theory to work, there would have been actually more than 2 shooters. One shooter from directly in front of him, or one shooter from the grassy knoll, and Landon even mentioned someone heard someone that they thought was on the right side of the building. I don't know why that's brought up. No one claims that a bullet came from the right side of the building. So again, we can keep raising all these interesting questions, but they don't contradict anything. That there was one gunman with 3 bullets. That's what's been found. That's what's been proven. Nothing contradicts it.
Landon, your closing statement?
My closing statement is this. Dallas believes that an impossible shot went through a tree and went on an impossible path from a back, out through a throat, through a shoulder, through a wrist, into a leg, with an impossibly different result when the next shot was shot into the head. And I think that's a lot harder to believe than that there was one shooter who shot 3 times, missed once, hit twice, and another shooter from another side who shot in the head. What the conspiracy was, I don't know, but it seems very clear to me that there was a conspiracy. Thank you.
All right.
Question?
Any questions? Any questions?
Yeah. How was the shooting from the building replicated, and was there evidence of it? Like, has it been done before? Has anybody like replicated that type of shot?
Yeah, CBS television in 1975 had 10 marksmen do this. They took what they did is they took a human-shaped piece of plywood, they put it on a track, and they had it drive away from a location, and they had marksmen shoot from that location. Multiple marksmen did it multiple times, having not actually practiced with that Carcano rifle. It is not at all a difficult shot. For any kind of marksman, it is actually a very easy shot. The 3 shots are spaced out across anywhere between 8 and 11 seconds, depending on where people thought the first shot came from, or when the first shot was struck. The first shot actually did not require any loading. It was already loaded. Boom, click, click. People average on the manual, what's the term for that?
Bolt action.
Yeah, bolt action. Anywhere from 1.85 to 2.3 seconds. Click, click. Now, here's another reason why it was a very easy shot, is that the road, Elm Street, actually is slightly going down. So in actuality, the harder shot is right here. But as the car goes further and further away from him and it's going slightly down, it maintains actually a steady, like it maintains relatively flat. And so this is actually by multiple shooters. In 1975, it was recreated again in 1992. It's been done many, many times. 3 shots within 8 seconds. And here's the other thing. He only hit twice. So this notion that it was impossible, that he was either, you hear a lot of conspiracy theorists go back and forth. Either he was a really crappy shot, the guy from the Marines who wasn't a very good shot, which doesn't explain why they would use him as the story, or he was to do what he did had to be incredible. Yet what he did was his first shot missed. It actually hit a tree. Second shot was quite easy. It was 88 yards away. Multiple people have done this from 200 yards away, hit it right in the nose. And the third shot was, again, 4 seconds later. That's 2.3 seconds. 1, 2, boom.
Snooze. You're losing them, man. All right. So,
Yes, it's been replicated multiple times, including...
first of all, it was replicated in the 70s. It was not replicated by the Warren Commission, who tried very, very hard to get this replicated. That's a big problem. They had a lot at stake to get that replicated, and they could not. 50 years ago, could people juggle chainsaws? No, they couldn't. Now, can they? Yes. No one could replicate the shot in the decade that the shot was done. Also, he was shooting through trees. If you know where the Texas School Book Depository is, if he was right here on the 6th floor, Dallas is saying that it's harder to shoot straight down when a person is 5 yards away from the window straight down than it is to shoot through trees when a person's 88 yards driving 30 miles an hour away from you.
Who's right? You know he was driving 30 miles an hour.
I think it would be way easier to shoot someone when they were slowing down and turning around a corner who's right below you. I mean, get that shot and take it right there. Why wait until he's over here? Because you've triangulated the point between two shooters. That's why you wait until the person gets there.
The reason you don't wait right, you don't shoot right here, is because Connolly's in the way. Connolly's in the front seat. So you wait till Connolly's out of the way and you shoot Kennedy. And the trees were only in his way on that first shot. These latter two shots were crystal clear. The trees were no longer in the way.
I say
and the car was going about 10 miles an hour.
I say that we should, it wasn't going 10 miles an hour. I say that we should let everybody vote and
Well, are there any other questions?
and then people can ask questions after that because I think some people kind of want to be done.
Let's vote.
So let's have everyone vote and then people can ask more questions after that.
Great.